Overpaying for anything sucks, especially socks, so why pay $45 for a single pair of grip socks when you can spend less than half? Pure Grip Socks Pro feature our best materials for optimal fit, moisture wicking, and performance at a fair price, just $16.99 a pair at puregripsocks.com.
Now, if you've been following this channel closely for the last year or so, then you'll know that Puma has been on fire when it comes to football boots. And I'm not even talking about just their top-end models, which are fantastic value for money at $200, as good if not better than other options out there for significantly less money, but $200 is still a lot. If you don't have that type of money to spend, their first tier takedown models have been on fire. I recently reviewed the Puma Ultra 2.4. It is as good as any top-end speed boot for $130, which is super impressive. But now that there's a new generation of Future Z, the question now becomes, how good are the takedown models? Well, pretty good. In fact, very good. Ladies and gentlemen, the brand new Puma Future Z 2.3, the first takedown model below the top end option, bearing a retail price of $130. We're similar to the first takedown model in the Ultra lineup. It features the exact same sole plate and stud pattern found on the most expensive variation, and many of the same elements with the upper, including Evo Knit Pro, as well as Fusion Fit rather than Fusion Fit Plus. But the difference there is actually quite minimal. For $130, you are by no means getting a takedown model experience. This is very, very close to the top end option. And like I've talked about on the channel before, unlike top end models where generally everything tends to be pretty good, with takedown models, especially at that $100 to $150 price range, you're going to find huge variation in stuff that is excellent to stuff that is questionable at best. This ranks amongst the best of the best in terms of value for money, and I want to talk about why that is in today's video, as well as compare it to the top end model, including how they fit and feel on feet. So if you're interested in learning more, please stick around, watch the entire review, and if you are interested in a pair of Future Z 2.3s for yourself, you can pick them up below their normal retail price by way of some exclusive SR4U coupon codes by checking out the first link down below. And as always, guys, if you enjoy the content, perhaps want to see more reviews of more affordable football boots on the channel, please don't forget to support this one with a like, and make sure you're subscribed along with hitting that little bell notification so you don't miss out on future reviews of all the latest football boots of 2022. So first things first, I just wanted to give you a little side-by-side between the top-end $200 Future Z 1.3 and the first takedown model $130 Future Z 2.3, where you can see side-by-side there's not a lot of difference. You can see they changed the graphics in the forefoot from black to silver on the takedown model, but other than that, they appear very similar. They're made from very similar materials. You don't get the wearable finish that looks all cool on the top end model on the takedown, but that affects performance in no way whatsoever. And considering this is already really good value for money at $70 less, it almost makes me question whether or not this 1.3 is even worth it. Starting with the upper, just like the top end model, the forefoot area, clearly in solid orange, is their Evo Knit Pro material, which is technically the same name as what you're gonna find on the 1.3, although if you look closely, it is a different knit pattern. You also have that micro texturing on the surface, and then added micro texturing that you don't get on the top end model here on the medial side, which I actually prefer over the top end version, even though it's really not doing much in the way of providing extra grip on the ball. I just think it looks quite premium. Nonetheless, this is a material that admittedly doesn't feel quite as nice as the top end model, although it by no means feels cheap. I think the major difference in feel is that this does seem to be a slightly thinner knit with a slightly cheaper padded liner, where it's actually a nylon type material rather than the really soft lining that you get on the Future Z 1.3, where you could make an argument that the top end model is that little bit more comfortable and more sock-like feeling on feet. I tend to agree with that particular statement, but that is not to say this is an uncomfortable pair of football boots, because as far as knitted uppers go on a takedown model, this is one of the very best that I think we've ever seen. Moving to the midfoot, you're going to find not Fusion Fit Plus, but Fusion Fit, which I'm not exactly sure what the difference is. Puma themselves don't really specify. Again, what you're gonna notice is that the internal liner is a cheaper nylon material rather than a microfiber with a bunch of different cutouts. That again is just more premium on the more expensive model, to be expected. And you'll also notice that the way that these lace up is a little bit different, and that you're missing the bottom lace position. What difference that actually makes? Probably nothing, but it is a notable difference. The Fusion Fit band itself appears to be made from a very similar, if not identical, elasticated knit material, where you can see these strips in black are a little bit thicker in terms of how they're stitched in or embroidered on the upper for the sake of added structure, and it's still plenty stretchy across the top, with the laces even being attached to the upper by way of knitted lace tubes, I guess is the best way to describe it, where, just like the top end model, when you tie the laces tight, it does a good job of stretching at the actual lace position, giving you that tension across the top of the foot as well as that tight wrap through the midfoot without squeezing your feet. So in terms of giving you the unique fit characteristics of that top end Future Z, it does carry over to the takedown model, which in my opinion is extremely impressive, because typically the fit and overall comfort is really what suffers when going from a takedown model to a top end model. And I really do feel like the top end model does feel that little bit more sock-like and natural compared to the 2.3. But again, the difference I think is pretty minor, where if anything, if you only had the opportunity to try the 2.3 rather than having the 1.3 first, I'm not sure that you would really notice much of a difference or feel like you're missing out on anything. One potentially significant difference, however, is the fact that the Future Z 2.3, unlike the top end 1.3, at least according to Puma, isn't being marketed as a laced or laceless football boot option, where they're saying on the top end model, you can remove the laces and wear them as laceless football boots, which I've tried. They're worse without the laces, but it's an option if you want to do it. I don't really see why you wouldn't be able to do that on the Future Z 2.3. Puma themselves are not saying that it's a feature with this particular football boot. And again, while this is technically not the same Fusion Fit Plus band, it's just Fusion Fit, the only major difference that I can make out is the additional lace position, which means nothing if you're going to pull the laces out, and the liner being a little bit on the cheaper side compared to that top end model. Also, the heel does seem to fit ever so slightly shallower, which I think would be worse when being worn without laces. But in general, just like the Future Z 1.3, if you are picking these up, I would strongly recommend using the laces to hold your foot in place, to lock your foot in place, and just get a better overall experience, where the football boot is objectively going to fit, feel, and perform better with the laces fully intact. Moving to the rear, just like the top end model, it's a low cut design with these extension pieces in elasticated knit. Like I just mentioned, internally it does feel a little bit shallower when your foot is inside the boot compared to the 1.3, although it's a fairly minor difference and not so shallow that the fit is concerning. The heel liner is more or less the same as well. Minimal padding, but this really soft microfiber heel liner that I'm quite a big fan of. And then the insole is fully removable, where again, you're going to find a minor difference in that this features a standard mesh liner on the surface rather than that soft silicone texture that the top end model has to prevent your foot from slipping a little bit. But otherwise, it's the same insole in terms of being a single layer of black foam with perforated yellow foam inserts, basically covering the entire bottom of your foot. Which brings us to the base of the football boot, where once again, Puma is doing something that is unheard of in the football boot industry, and that is giving you the same sole plate and stud pattern found on the top end model. Typically with the takedown model, aside from cheaping out on certain elements of the upper, typically the sole plate and stud pattern, mainly the sole plate, tends to be the cheapest aspect of a takedown model football boot in terms of feel. However, this is the same sole plate you're going to get on the $200 option, and it feels quite premium as you'd expect, something that I think really separates the Puma takedown models compared to everything else from every other brand. Really, really impressive that they're able to do that. And again, it translates to better overall feel than anything else at this price point. You're of course also going to see that with the Ultra 2.4. And as far as the stud pattern is concerned, they are labeling this as FG-AG. Personally, I view all of these FG-AG stud patterns from Puma as more FG than they are AG. So for use on natural grass, I really like this one. It's a nice blend of kind of grip, but also that freedom to twist and pivot with this half circle shaped stud. Is it as aggressive as some of the more, I don't want to say popular, but let's say football boots in the speed category? Definitely not. But I do think it's one of those stud patterns that performs really well. It's well-rounded in general, and as long as you're not looking for anything in particular, I don't see why you're gonna have too many issues with the way that this fits, feels, and performs. Which brings us to the weight. Perhaps that's a significant difference between the takedown and top-end versions of the new Future Z. Well, we're gonna find out right now in real time using a scale both in the same size 9.5 US, starting off with the top-end Future Z 1.3. You can see that they weigh in at 7.6 ounces, the equivalent of 216 grams. Remember those numbers. And we'll change the scale back, throw on the takedown model Future Z 2.3, and you can see that they weigh in at 7.9 ounces, the equivalent of 223 grams, which for those of you at home doing the math, that is a difference of less than 10 grams, which in my opinion is an amount of weight that you aren't necessarily going to feel on your feet. From a weight perspective, in my eyes, they're pretty much identical, both very lightweight. To me, the bigger difference that you're gonna notice between these two is that the Future Z 1.3 does feel softer and slightly more sock-like against your feet, where the Future Z 2.3 might make your wallet feel a little bit better for a couple extra grams. On feet, as I've been describing throughout this entire video, there is nothing about the Future Z 2.3 that feels like a takedown model, despite the $130 price tag. On the same sole plate as the top end model, that feels very premium compared to most football boots at this price point. As far as the upper is concerned, again, it's not quite as soft, it's not quite as nicely padded on the inside with the lining materials used as the top end Future Z 1.3, but it still feels really, really good. The knit through the forefoot and toe box area is soft and pliable, and then the Fusion Fit band through the midfoot really does a cool job of wrapping your foot, giving you that tight fit, but without squeezing and restricting your feet in an uncomfortable way. With the laces tied tight, you have all the tension you need, again, without that squeezing sensation, making this, in my opinion, one of the more comfortable football boots out there if you don't want something with a leather upper. As far as width is concerned, they definitely have some decent width to them, although I don't think that they are quite as wide as the top end model. I'm not exactly sure why that's the case. They're a little bit more slim through the midfoot, but still gonna be wide enough for most people. I don't see most people having issues with the way that these fit their feet. There's just so much adaptability to the way that they've constructed the midfoot with those elasticated knit materials. And as far as sizing is concerned, I'm wearing these in my usual size 9.5 US, and they do run a little bit long in comparison to most other football boots, maybe a quarter size. So for most people, I would personally recommend going true to size, but if you find that your football boots are already a little bit too big, maybe going down half a size might not be a bad idea. True to size for most should work out though. So in conclusion, full credit to Puma. If you have $150 or less to spend on a pair of football boots, whether it's the Future Z 2.3 or the Ultra 2.4, you cannot go wrong with the options they have on offer. They are simply way better than any of their competition for these types of football boots. As for how these compare to the more expensive Future Z 1.3, is that top end model worth the extra 70 bucks? For me personally, being a boot nerd, I think the top end model does offer that more premium experience. It feels softer, it feels more natural, it feels more sock-like. To me, it's a better overall football boot, but the Future Z 2.3 at 130 bucks comes very, very close. It is 90 to 95% of the same experience at a much lower price tag, and for that reason, how could I not recommend this to anybody on a budget looking for basically a top-end football boot experience? This is the new gold standard for takedown models, and I'll be very curious to see with upcoming releases whether or not big brands like Nike and Adidas follow suit in what Puma is doing, because honestly, if you're buying a takedown model at this price point and it's not Puma, you are missing out on some incredible value.